Hello, everyone, and welcome to 15 Questions with an Archaeologist, brought to you by the National Park Service, Southeast Archaeological Center. I'm Josh Guerrero, and I'm your host, and this is the show where we're trying to collect as many interviews as we can, where we ask 15 questions with an archaeologist. Each podcast episode will feature one archaeologist answering the same 15 questions. I think it's going to be fun, and we just might learn something. And joining me today, I have Emily Wapshott, who is currently working at Southwest Archaeology and Archaeologists Engage in the UK. So, Emily, thanks so much for taking the time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Josh. Hi.
Yeah, I appreciate you jumping on this early in the morning. I know you've just been kind of coming off of a little bit of field work, and you're kind of just sort of squeezing this interview in. And you and I, we've actually been connected for a good while now, so I'm glad that we're actually able to get a collaboration going here.
Yes, yeah. Instagram has been a revelation, actually. That's one of the things I enjoy most about it, is being able to connect with colleagues all around the world. It's a really exciting platform for that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's go ahead and kick off this interview then. And we just kind of start with learning a little bit more about you. As I've mentioned, you're currently working at Southwest Archaeology, and then you also have Archaeologists Engage, which you're the co-founder of. So tell us a little bit about those organizations and, what is it that you do there? And I know you're also doing some other things as well. So care to fill us in?
Yes, so I am a commercial archaeologist, and that means that in the UK, I work within the sort of the planning system and sort of state-funded or developer-funded work. So that would be linked to housing developments, road developments, sort of planning on historic buildings, and sort of large-scale landscape surveys, so sort of visual impact assessments and things like that. So I work all across the West Country. In the UK, so sort of Devon, Somerset, Cornwall largely, but we do work across the UK wider afield. And Southwest Archaeology is a commercial company. So what we do is we manage, if somebody will apply for planning permission in the UK for something, either for building something from scratch in a field or changing their house, then part of that planning application will either be pre-application work or conditions that come with that permission for that work, and therefore we work within that area. And so, yeah, we have a really sort of broad range of things that we do, from sort of geophysics, again, landscape survey, historic building recording, and then sort of monitoring diggers on excavations and hand excavating as well.
All right, outstanding. Yeah, I think you and I will have to stay in touch, because I'm actually kind of curious to learn a little bit more about just the southwest region of England in general. As we were talking before we hit record here, I studied at York, and the furthest southwest I've been was Bournemouth for a conference one time. Yeah. But yeah, everything west of that, though, is kind of uncharted territory to me, if you will. So very cool. All right. So, and that makes me curious to ask you this next question, and that is, if money were no object whatsoever, what type of archaeology would you do? Do you think you'd continue on doing commercial archaeology as you are now, or do you think you might pursue something different?
That's a really interesting question. Do you know what? I really love my job. I think it's a real privilege to be able to allow and facilitate modernization and development, which we all need. The world needs to keep moving, doesn't it? But also to ensure that we can preserve, my nation's heritage as well. And just the breadth that you get with commercial archaeology of, being able to see a medieval manor house or a Bronze Age roundhouse or a 19th century gunpowder mill, or, you get that breadth of time, which I really, really enjoy. So I think I would just, if money was no object, I would still be out there in the field digging the trenches, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I work in we call it compliance here as part of the Park Service, but it's effectively kind of like commercial archaeology, except we more or less work within the different national parks here in the Southeast. But I do like having that good breadth of things that you can kind of experience. I may be in right now I'm at a Civil War battlefield site as we're recording this episode, but then I'll find maybe like a prehistoric site somewhere else. And you just really get to kind of dabble into a lot of different time periods. So I agree with you that is kind of it's a nice change of pace, I'd say, So kind of, again, let's go back in time a little bit here to learn just a little bit more about you. And I want to ask you, where did you receive your education and why did you choose to study at that location? Or perhaps it was maybe even a couple of locations that you had studied at.
Yeah. So my undergraduate degree I did at the University of Exeter down in the southwest. And that was actually what introduced me to that region, because I actually came from the southeast before. And I chose to study at Exeter for a number of reasons. They had a really good write-up by the students themselves. In the UK, we have a student satisfaction register as well as a sort of a skills and sort of degree standards register. And Exeter was really high on that. And it was a really beautiful campus. And there was a lot of young staff at the university in the archaeology department. Sort of younger professors, and it was very focused on the practical side of things. There was a lot of fieldwork options. There were a lot of professors doing work around the world that you could then come onto their digs with them. And I really loved that practical focus. You know, I love the theory side of things, but I wanted to be an archaeologist, so it was a career choice for me. And the other thing was that Exeter did double degrees. So my first undergraduate degree was a double honours degree in history and archaeology. So it gave me that sort of documentary research side and then the practical side of that. So I wanted quite a broad base to start with before I started looking at any kind of specialties. And so I started there, and then I stayed at Exeter for a 2-year master's where I did experimental archaeology, because I love that idea of we dig up and find the artifacts, but then I always had that question of, well, how was it made, or how were they using that? So I really wanted to explore that side of it, and that was really, really fun. A lot of really great metallurgy and pottery making, and that was very much an indulgence on my behalf. That was not a career focused one. That was just the love of it. And then I went on and did a postgraduate diploma at the College of Estate Management in land management, kind of get that practical, because obviously again I was aiming for commercial, to get that practical land management side. And then I did an MSc at Reading University, which is where the College of Estate Management was based, in surveying, so building surveying, sort of proper large scale land surveying, to give me again a broad base, because I wanted a career in the commercial sort of planning world.
So it sounds like you've been involved in academia for quite some time, dabbling in all these different things. Yes. I think it was I think 11, 12 years. Wow.
By the time I got out, but I did work. So my last one, I worked part-time as well as doing it. So.
All right. Always helpful, you know, so to kind of break things up a little bit.
I had a very good sleep at the end of it.
All right. Outstanding. All right. So kind of dialing things in to learn a little bit more about your experience in archaeology thus far. And of course, you know, work in commercial archaeology, as we mentioned, you get to go around quite a bit. You get to see different sites. So can you kind of tell us about some of the most interesting sites that you've gotten to work on so far?
Yes. So, I mean, I think one of the things I really love, like I've said about about the commercial archaeology, is the sort of sites that you don't expect. So one that really sticks with me was back in 2016. And sort of in the company, we sort of know it as the Priory in the Pipe Trench. And it really explains the value in the UK, where you've got historic buildings that may have been built on sites with a really ancient past as well. And it was a historic house, and it had a very unusual name, which sort of suggested a possible ecclesiastical history. And in and around some of the farm buildings and the garden, there were some carved stones. But we didn't sort of know any more than that. The house itself was very valuable. It sort of had a 16th and 17th and 18th century phases. So we did a building recording project there as the new owners were renovating it. But we also did monitoring of all the groundworks, any sort of service trenching and things around, because we knew it was a high potential site. And actually in digging the very narrow pipe trench down the front of the garden lawn, we did actually find the early medieval lost priory.
Oh, wow.
Which sort of answered the question of why it had that ecclesiastical name. all the local folklore, which people didn't really know if it was a sort of a 19th century romance or was it real, and it was. And we actually found the church, and I found the apsidal end of the church and the chapel. So we were able to just briefly excavate and record the half section that we found, which was really, really, really exciting. So that was a great one. And then actually my earliest site I ever worked on, I was actually allowed on as a child. And it was with UCL Archaeology up in West Sussex in the UK. And it was in a village called Bignor, which has a wonderful Roman villa, which was where I grew up as a child. And I walked myself over the fields as a little girl when I was about 7 or 8 and said to the archaeologist, I want to be an archaeologist. And they let me go onto the site and help them dig. And I dug there for almost 10 years every summer with them when they did their field school. Went on as a little site assistant, and that was a magical place. But just sort of generally everything I do, sort of being able to go into historic buildings that, you know, maybe 500-600 years old, or find and then be able to protect something that we didn't know about. So I had a site a couple of years ago which was a house that looked very Edwardian. So the Edwardian period in the UK is the early 1900s. And it was a very classical, it was sort of brick, it had all the sort of architectural features that we would associate with the early 1900s. But its plan was very unusual. And it was in an early part of a historic village. And actually, when I was able to go inside and up into the roof space, we were able to identify that, in fact, it was a medieval hall from 1450. And the roof was still there, and it was smoke blackened from the open fire. And then we were able to then build a really complex plan of the house where the walls were thick, and we were able to then tell the story of this house that wasn't 100 years, but was in fact 600 years. So I'm lucky in that, you know, I get to see sites like this sort of every day. That is my career, which is why I love it.
Yeah, I've noticed that the UK has no shortage of just amazing and immaculate sites out there. So lucky you.
Yeah, we are lucky. It's because we're a tiny island and we've been very densely populated for a long time. So yeah,
you can tell I'm a little bit nostalgic about my time in the UK, just because everywhere I went, I'm just seeing these incredible sites, these incredible buildings, you know, that are just, you know, hundreds of years old. And yeah, so anyway, so before I get too nostalgic, we'll go ahead, we'll move on to the next question. And this is going to be dialing things in a little bit more now. You know, we heard about some of the amazing sites that you've gotten to work on, but I want to ask about artifacts next. What would you say is perhaps the coolest artifact that you've ever recovered?
So like I said to you earlier, I'm going to flip this question a little bit into ideas of people listening to the podcast who may be archaeologists, who may not be archaeologists, sort of a little think about how we value items, because one of the questions I always get asked sort of by sort of builders on sites and things when you interview is, you know, what have you found that was worth the most money? And I sort of wanted to sort of think about how we value items, because obviously for us as archaeologists, every broken piece of pottery is valuable to us because that tells us part of the story. But sometimes that doesn't always transfer forward, and we sort of automatically think of maybe treasure when you think of archaeologists. But sort of the item that means the most to me that I found was the item that started my whole archaeology story, which was as a very little girl. I started digging in my parents' garden when I was only about 2 years old, and was constantly saying I was finding stuff. And I actually found a little tin with some little late Georgian lead soldiers in the garden. It was buried, and there was a little bit of a note, although that was very badly degraded. And obviously, and then there was some little tacks, and it'd obviously been buried by a little child sort of 200 years before. And for me, that instant connection with the past and making the past real, and that you know, that there were real people, it really happened, it wasn't that dissociation. And even at that really, really young age, you know, I sort of it just blew my mind, and it started me on my archaeology story. And I actually still have the largest of the soldiers, and he sits on my desk at work. Wow. There he is. So
it's incredible.
Yeah, with all the paint is still sort of partially still on it. I mean, you know, he unfortunately he's lost his leg and the horse has lost his feet. But yeah, so he is he's a Prussian soldier, in fact. So probably from the sort of later 1700s. So that's yeah, flipping that question a little bit to you there, Josh. But that for me is the coolest thing I ever found, because that started my journey.
All right. Outstanding. Right on. And by the way, for all of our listeners who just may be listening to the podcast, the video version of this call is going to be available on the SEAC YouTube channel if you actually want to see what Emily just showed us. So so definitely go and check that out. But that's amazing. And that's a really good point, because it's kind of nice to reflect on the earliest of the earliest that really kind of sets you down that path. You know, because I hear, you know, from different archaeologists, you know, journeys can be different as to what sets them down that path. And so I kind of like that your journey actually begins with actually finding something of your own in your own backyard. So that's amazing. All right. So I want to shift gears a little bit here next. And I want to talk a little bit about mentorship, because I believe that mentorship is critical with, you know, our development as an archaeologist. And of course, you've gotten to pursue your education, and your journey as an archaeologist has taken you to different universities, many different places. So who would you say has been your mentor, or maybe even you had a couple of mentors along the way, and how have they influenced you along the way?
Yes. So, I mean, I think the first people that really deserve a shout out are that UCL field crew, the academic staff that were running the field school for their students, you know, who took on a very small child and sort of realized quite quickly that I was really, really serious, and, you know, continued to encourage me and came and spoke to my parents about, you know, what my career options might be. And you know, I found them fairly recently that, you know, they made me a certificate every year to show other new sort of skill that I'd learned. And you know, that was so precious and so important in a child that was really determined and passionate, but could easily have sort of lost her way in not knowing how to access archaeology. So that you know, shout out to the UCL field school team, because you know, they were amazing. And then at university, I had some really fantastic lecturers. Dr. Bruce Bradley, actually, who is an American academic, and he was the sort of lead of my MA in Experimental Archeology, and just a really inspiring, passionate sort of leader and teacher, and just very open, really, really approachable. And, you know, a great intellect, but would equally, you know, come and sit with us and chat in the pub with a beer, you know, and that was that approachableness of, which is one of the reasons why I loved Exeter University. And that really good relationship between staff and students was really inspiring. And then Dr. Alan Outram as well from Exeter University. And I had a bit of a health sort of issue towards the end of my degree. And, you know, they just sort of supported me fantastically and were really, really helpful, and made sure that I was still able to fully sort of achieve what you know, they believed I could, and they believed in me. So yeah, those two are definite mentors. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. So what I have next for you is, and I'm not sure how much exposure you've had to cultural heritage management and archaeology in other countries, but our next question is, what country out there handles cultural heritage management and archaeology the best? Like, who just gets it? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
So I have done a little bit of work in Greece when I was younger as a student, and then also sort of as a tourist, an archaeologist, obviously sort of gone to a lot of sites in Greece, and I was really impressed actually with a lot of the sites in Crete, the early sort of Bronze Age and prehistoric sites. They're often in quite mountainous areas, very difficult to get to, and you know, they had a lot of very good shelters. There was a lot of really good sort of management and seemingly really good welfare for their excavators and workers too, which I thought was really good, and they seemed very aware of sort of managing their heritage in and amongst the sort of the tourism pressures and things like that on a Greek island. And I think the Knossos site is very well run. How they manage, you know, huge numbers of people over a sort of ancient Greek palace site that obviously is quite a sensitive place, and could be damaged by those numbers of people. So I think I'm really impressed with Greece. I think the UK does really well with its commercial archaeology, in the sense that archaeology is managed within that planning system. So, it might look like an empty field, but if it has a Bronze Age roundhouse underneath it or something that we don't know about, we're quite good at catching those. So, at the moment, not as much gets lost, although there are some sort of changes at the moment in the UK. So I think there are some risks that'll be riding back, which I think is really unfortunate. I think one of the places that really stands out actually is really dedicating themselves to archaeology in a sensible statewide way are actually sort of Norway and Sweden, a lot of the Scandinavian countries. They are absolutely brilliant as well. And I think sort of local groups that I've met sort of in other places that maybe aren't state-led, but there's a lot of work goes on in India. There's a lot of really passionate local history groups and community groups that are out there. And I think that's the point I'd probably make, is I think a lot of governments probably don't do as well as they could. And there's a lot of sort of groups and societies that are out there, doing the work and making sure they do. So I think probably if we flip that question round is, I think governments could probably learn a lot from the history societies in their local neighborhoods, to be honest.
All right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Right on. All right. And the next question that I have for you is about volunteers. And since you're in kind of commercial archaeology, I'm guessing there's probably not too much volunteers involved with that, or maybe I might be wrong. I guess what's your experience been with you've volunteered yourself in the past, but do you welcome on any volunteers in any of the work that you're doing now?
So with a lot of the commercial sites, it obviously is quite difficult because they're busy building sites. We do have aspects of commercial archaeology in the UK where if we can build in public value to the dig, then we do. So quite often we will have open days at sort of the end of a dig, if we can, for the community to come on. That's sort of the way I would say that we would do public archaeology in that aspect. We may give a presentation at the end, or maybe there's a presentation at the beginning as part of that planning process. So there's that sort of aspect. Most of my volunteer work I do in my own local community with my own local heritage projects and through Archaeologists Engage, which is all that public engagement work. And but we do sometimes, the South West Archaeology, we do manage and facilitate community projects for private institutions. So we have two big institutions in the UK, Historic England and English Heritage are the sort of administrative and public arm of one, and then the National Trust. So we've done a couple of fairly big community projects over the last couple of years with volunteers, and I love it. I love when we can get the volunteers on. Being able to help somebody sort of discover the past in that way is such a privilege. It's really great, and they have such different perspectives. If somebody is an engineer or a language specialist or an artist or whatever, and they will bring all their particular skills to the table when they're digging, and that's great. That can really actually move things forward sometimes.
All right, that's great. Yeah, it was one thing I did take notice of when I was living in the UK, is that public involvement was pretty prevalent in the UK. The public seemed to be very engaged with their own local heritage, and of course just the UK's heritage in general too. So that was certainly something that I was very pleased to see. That was pretty cool. All right. So the next couple questions that I have for you, this is going to be getting into what I say is the core of what it means to be an archaeologist. And I like to think that these are fun questions. So, but I guess that could be up for interpretation. But the first of those questions is, what is just the best part about being an archaeologist?
All of it. What's the best part? It is that thrill, I think, for me, of being able to tell the stories that don't appear in the history books. Being able to tell that sort of the everyday ordinary stories of ordinary life, sort of broadening what we know about the past, and that excitement. And so, every broken piece of pottery, every wall, to me, we're storytelling. We're telling the story, but we're telling real stories. And at Archaeologists Engage, we have a bit of a cheesy byline, but it's every story counts. And I think for me, that is I have a very sort of a human, sort of emotional sort of connection to archaeology, and why I do it is being able to tell those stories of the past.
Okay. And, but on the flip side though, what would you say is the worst part about being an archaeologist?
The rain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the UK, it isn't particularly well paid. So if people want to go into it, they have to be prepared for that. It is a very sort of commercial archaeology, a very reactive profession. So, you know, you could be at the end of the country one day, and like we were saying earlier, you could be at the other end the other day. So there's a lot of travel, there's a lot of moving around. You could be quite nomadic and quite flexible with that. Obviously, it is hard work outside, often in bad weather. But I think there's a joy in all of that as well. I think one thing that I have noticed a little bit recently, which I am finding it's not sort of disappointing, but I think it is a little bit of a darker side of archaeology, is the fact that it is becoming quite political. You know, politics is becoming quite divisive, and I've noticed definitely in the UK, I don't know what it's like with yourself over in the US, but heritage, culture, and history is getting thrown around a little bit like a weapon, and that's maybe not so great.
Yeah, I've heard similar things to some of the other colleagues that I have that are based in the UK. It kind of seems like, you know, archaeology, cultural heritage management kind of tends to take a little bit of a back seat compared to like some of the other sciences and things like that, which of course, you know, are important too.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just, there's a lot of contributions to be made by, you know, archaeologists like yourself, and then other cultural heritage professionals around the country too. So, you know, maybe think about you all a little bit more too, I suppose.
Yes.
All right. So the next question that I have for you, and this is a tribute to The Right Stuff, which is a wonderful novel written by Tom Wolfe. I would like to ask you, who is the greatest archaeologist that you've ever seen?
Oh, wow. Okay. So again, to be a little bit revolutionary in this and flip that, I've probably got two answers to that, if that's okay. So one would be that, you know, in commercial archaeology, we have a lot of sort of contract diggers that their entire life has been all about that excavation, and they always blow me away because, you know, guys and girls, you know, they may have 30, 40, you know, sometimes if they're at their end of their career, 50 years of experience on site, and sort of the quality of the work, you know, is outstanding. So I think probably a little bit of a shout out to the commercial archaeology world there. There's some really outstanding, excellent archaeologists out there that maybe don't get the sort of the limelight of academia, but are just solidly out there doing the work, and protecting the record. And then I probably I have a couple of sort of female archaeology sort of heroes, and one would be Dr. Carenza Lewis. So you said earlier about how the UK public are really engaged with history and archaeology. Mm-hmm. One of those reasons is probably there was a very famous TV show over here called Time Team, mm-hmm. which started in the 90s. And it was all sort of following that kind of commercial archaeology. And it was just a really great open format, really accessible. And I was a small child when that started. And of course, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And then to see Dr. Carenza there, and you know, female archaeologists up there, and sort of being so brilliant, and it was just really, really inspiring and really wonderful for me. I was like, I can do that. I can go and be an archaeologist too. And a little bit later, on in the same TV program, actually, there's another archaeologist on there called Rapture Dave, and that was she sort of was starting to join, I think, sort of just before I started to go to uni. And again, it was just really, you know, she's a really strong sort of personality, and she's gone on to do lots of other archaeology programs, and they were definitely, you know, sort of watching TV, that sort of cultural aspect of just really inspiring women. And then sort of current people, there's Professor Alice Roberts, who's bioarchaeologist, and Dr. Kat Jarman, who does a lot with the Vikings and things like that. Again, it's sort of their public personas, but they're, I think, probably some of my female archaeology heroes.
All right, right on. Outstanding. All right, so the next couple questions I have for you, Emily, these are questions that I'm sure that all archaeologists have been asked at one point in time. And the first of those questions is, have you ever found a dinosaur?
Yes. So first point I would probably make is, paleontology and archaeology, are slightly different. And obviously it's the question that you always get asked by kids, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. That's their sort of obvious way into heritage and archaeology. But actually, yeah, when I was as a student, I did some excavation out in the States and with Bruce and with Exeter University, and we got to go to visit some tar pits, and we got to go through the Badlands and things like that. So we did actually get to see some of the paleontology happening, which was very cool.
Yeah, South Dakota, it has some very great paleontological sites. The Mammoth sites here, it's pretty incredible, actually. So, I can see how you just might come across something in that area. So very cool. And that's actually, Emily, I think it's been a good while before someone actually answered yes to this question. So, I mean, granted, of course, it's not necessarily within our area of expertise, but hey.
No, I've not done any paleontology sort of since, and never will, because obviously, human archaeology versus dinosaurs. But yeah, it's obviously when you're a student, it's great to see that both sides of that. And you guys in the US, you have so much fantastic prehistoric archaeology and so much fantastic paleontology. So it was really exciting to see both aspects of that.
All right. Very cool. All right. The next question I have for you that goes along these same lines, and that is, how do you feel about Indiana Jones?
Well, I love him, obviously. We all do. But we sort of love to hate him, I think, probably archaeologists, don't we? Because, world's worst archaeologist.
Yeah.
But they're fantastic action adventure films, aren't they? And, I think they're this sort of great gateway for people, particularly kids, sort of to come across archaeology, what it might be as a sort of theory, even if that's a bit skewed. So yeah, I think he's probably will get a bit of a reassessment maybe in sort of modern times. I'm sure there's probably elements that are problematic. I mean, the way that they portray the indigenous peoples, that he tends to always be blowing up all of their temples and villages. That's quite the opposite of what we would hope to do. But as a fun action adventure franchise, I think it's they're great, aren't they? They're great fun.
Yeah, and also as archaeologists, we're not out there battling the forces of evil over these things either.
No, generally not. I mean, battling the forces of the weather, less so the forces of evil.
Yeah, right, indeed. All right, so I got a couple more questions for you, Emily, and we're going to kind of start wrapping up on a little bit more of a serious note now. And the first question I have for you wrapping up is, what advice would you give young people, or maybe just even anyone for that matter, who may be seeking to make a career in archaeology?
Right. Well, sort of splitting that into, if you're a parent of a young child that's showing interest in archaeology, all kids love dinosaurs, but I found I do a lot of work with kids. It's quite obvious quite early, the children that are going to transfer that to other things. So I think if you're a parent, and your kid's showing some interest, maybe talk to your teacher, have a look locally for a local museum, take them round, see if you can speak to sort of one of the docents, see if there's any archaeology clubs for kids out there, because there are a lot. In the UK, there's the Young Archaeologist Club, which is run by the Council of British Archaeology, and they have lots of links to local groups and websites that you can go on. I just think just as a parent, if your kid's into it, just encourage them. There's lots of lovely TV programs, magazines, National Geographic, Current Archaeology, get them reading, take them to heritage sites, wherever that might be, let them indulge. Because I think the most important thing is gaining experience. So for older kids, and then young people who may want to go to university, again, see if you can find a local archaeology or history group. Can you volunteer at your local museum, or a national park, a state park? sort of get out there and amongst it. I mean, I think one of the things that certainly with like Indiana Jones and the Mummy and other stories like that, there tends to be quite a big uptick at university for applications after some sort of an archaeology film comes out. But also in the UK, we do quite often have quite a lot of dropouts after the first year. And I think that might be the fact that the sort of the hard work reality sort of kicks in, but it isn't as glamorous as the movies portray. So I think if you're interested and you're engaged, the best thing is to do is sort of get out there and see if you can do some digs and, you know, heck, look up, see if there's an archaeology company or a commercial archaeology company in the area and ring them and ask their advice, or ask if you can come along for some work experience or a day, or, you know, and most companies, if they can't do that, they might know somebody else that can, or they'll be willing, you know, to help, because it's so great when people do want to join.
Yeah, that's a really good point, you know, to really kind of test the waters a little bit first, because I think, especially going back to what we were just talking about with Indiana Jones, sometimes it creates this sort of romantic view of archaeology, doesn't it? You know, you get to work outside, you get to travel, you get to do this, you get to do that. But then sometimes when travel starts to interfere with your personal life, or if you know you have a family, it interferes with that. And then of course in the UK, as you alluded to, it rains a lot, so you're working outside in the rain. And here in the Southeast, it's really hot, really muggy. You know, you might have to check yourself for ticks after the field day to make sure none latched on. So that's really good advice to really kind of see if you're going to like it, because it's a big investment to go through the whole process to get there. So, all right, outstanding. All right, I got one last question for you, Emily, and this is a pretty big one too. Are you ready?
Okay.
What can the general public do to help protect archaeological sites?
So I think the easy one there is sort of inform yourselves if you can. Sort of watch the TV programs. Again, go to your local museum, and just sort of learn a little bit about your local area, engage with your local area. One of the things I sort of try to do with the kids locally in my local area is sort of to talk to them about their town's history and sort of create a sense of ownership for them. And I think that's what the public can do, really, is sort of understand that this heritage belongs to all of us, and it's all really, really valuable, and it's our past, it's our collective human, you know, past. And, you know, there are different values within that, of course, but you know, I think if you see there's a building in your local town maybe that's falling down or isn't sort of being loved or whatever, and maybe look up, see if there's a conservation officer or there's an official, and you can send an email and say, hey, you know, there's this really great building, or there's this, you know, this burial mound, or, you know, and I was a bit worried because I saw like some bites riding over it, or you know, I was a bit worried the roof looks really bad, and I just wondered if there's someone I can, you know, ask about that, you know, is there a group, or, and I think then also, you know, volunteer for your local history societies and groups. I mean, all over the world, there's passionate little local community groups doing things. So, you know, contributions can be time. You can volunteer, or maybe you could help fundraise. Especially, you know, we've got archaeology is such a wide thing, and there's so many art and cultural aspects of that. So that, you know, fundraising can be really great and really fun. Just engage with it, you know, come out and engage with it, and enjoy it, and sort of live history and archaeology, and don't be scared of it. You know, it's not another country, it's here, it's amongst us, and it does belong to us all. Yeah, that's probably.
All right. Outstanding. All right. Well, Emily, that's it. That's all 15 questions wrapped up here. But before we close out, I want to give you a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit more about Archaeologists Engage. I know you're a co-founder, and this is a bit of a passion project for you and the other archaeologists that you've teamed up with for this. So by all means, you know, tell us a little bit about that, and also where can our listeners reach out and connect with you? I know you're out there on social media and things like that.
Yes, yeah. So I have an Instagram, a social media account, Emily the Archaeologist. So yeah, which is lots of photos of what I do day to day. So, you know, please feel free to connect there. Archaeologists Engage, we have a website, which is archaeologistsengage.org. And what we are really is we're just a small collection of sort of academics and field archaeologists from around the world. And it's sort of it's a non-profit umbrella, really, which helps us organise all our own individual public engagement work. And the idea came about from the EAA, which is the European Association of Archaeologists, one of the meetings back in, I think it's about 2015, and a group of us just had a couple of really great lectures, and we were sat in the pub, as archaeologists will do, chatting afterwards, and we just thought, wouldn't it be great, if we can get more public engagement and more professional archaeologists and more academics just out there going to speak to the local school, maybe giving a talk in the museum, helping out, just so that that the local public can actually talk to real archaeologists, and quite easily, just making ourselves a bit more accessible in any way that we can. And so that's what we do. We've got people from sort of all over the world. We've got sort of Australian archaeologists. We've got guys from Scandinavia, India, and sort of links with other groups from all over the world as well. And that's Archaeologists Engage, really.
All right. And I'll be sure to get all of those links in the show notes so the listeners can go and find them there. Well, Emily, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. I know you've been really busy getting to and fro to the field lately, but I really appreciate you, fitting me into your schedule this morning and, sharing all this with myself and the listeners. This has been great.
Thanks so much. It's been really fun.
All right. Awesome. All right, everyone. That's our show for today. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at NPSSEAC. That is at NPSSEAC. And be on the lookout for more episodes of 15 Questions with an Archaeologist dropping at the first of every single month. And please remember that since we work for the government, we spell archaeology without the A and the E, so it's just a little bit different when you read it in the title. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm Josh Guerrero, and I'll see you in the next episode.